Our next speaker has been speaking about innovation for a long time. He hosted the New Inventors on ABC TV for a long time, and in that time worked with hundreds and hundreds of inventors. And he now speaks to organisations about how everyone in organisations can become more innovative and how to build a culture of innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome me. Thank you. I have a different voice for keynote. No, thank you very much. In 2004, I got this job hosting the New Inventors on ABC TV. And I didn't get it because I had any expertise in the field of innovation or invention or science. I got it because I did a brilliant audition, because the previous week we bought a house and had a terrifying mortgage. So that's how I got it. And I remember at the time I was actively suspicious of the term innovation. I thought it was sort of, I don't know, so it's just one of those words people use. I remember the previous week we got in to buy a fridge for a new house that we had a huge mortgage for. And the guy said, oh, you should buy this fridge. And I said, why? He said, it's got this new innovation. It's really good. I said, what is it? He said, if you leave the door open, it beeps. And I said, well, if it's so bloody clever, why isn't it shut? You know, that would be a more useful. And it was around the time there was a drugs in sport scandal, right? And it just seemed weird, and like we're having now, it just seemed odd to me that we're inventing and creating and innovating all these new things that we were then trying to ban. Sort of didn't make sense. I remember at the time, the most sensible thing that was said about drugs in sport was actually said by a rugby league player, Darren Lockyer, who is quite smart for a rugby league player, actually, which possibly isn't saying much. It's like saying quite tall for a bonsai tree. But Darren Lockyer said, he said, there's so much stuff around at the moment, additives, supplements, whatever. You've got to be so careful. I always reckon if you can't spell it, don't take it. And I thought that might be all right for him, but most rugby league players wouldn't even be drinking milk, would they? Gatorade would be out of the question. They'd be like, what? But very soon, I started seeing all these people on the New Inventors, 3 new Australian innovations and inventions a week, and seeing the remarkable people and the remarkable things that they come up with. And I remember the one that really turned it on for me. There was this, 10 years ago, everyone was trying to save water, right? And we were looking everywhere to save water. And yet every day, every one of us would turn on a hot tap, and what would we do? We'd watch it go down the sink, watch water go down the sink. We go, no, not ready yet, not ready yet, not ready yet. And we had to wait until the hot water came and got rid of all the cold water in the pipes. But we didn't think that was wasted water. We just thought that was the price of getting hot water. You had to get rid of all the cold water. Well, this guy, Lloyd Linson-Smith was his name, he was looking at it one day and he had an idea. And he put a thermostat in the tap, right? And so you turn on the hot tap and all the water below a certain temperature gets diverted away into a holding tank. And so nothing comes out the hot tap until the hot water comes out. Then the next time you turn on the cold tap, what comes out? All the water you just saved. And I thought, what? How did he see that? There were 20 million of us turning on hot taps 2 or 3 times a day, and yet none of us saw that. How did he see it? Why didn't I see it? And if I'm missing that right in front of my face, what else am I missing? And how can I learn to see it? And it made me realise what an amazing force innovation is. It's taken us out of the caves. Everything in this room that is person-made, which is pretty much everything, is a result of human innovation. Of course, we still complain, but we don't complain that Gronk was eaten by a tiger. We complain that the plane was 15 minutes late, which really isn't that bad. And of course, the pace of change now is faster than ever before, which is exciting, isn't it? There's new stuff all the time. But if you're in business, it's scary, because it means that no matter how well we do things now, if we keep doing them the same way, sooner or later, and probably sooner, it's going to be outdated. Tragically, today's cutting-edge best practice is tomorrow's fax machine. Something that was really cool at the time, but now hardly anyone uses. So the way to stay relevant, the way to prosper, is to continue to keep coming up with better ways of doing things, to continue to innovate. Okay, great. But how do you do it? I reckon, having met probably more innovators and inventors than anyone, almost anyone in Australia because of that program, I reckon there's 3 things that they do better than anyone else. And the good news is they're not things that are terribly complicated. They're not things that are only available to a certain group of people. They're things we can all do. And before I tell you what they are, I just want to ask everyone a question. Put up your hand if you reckon you're capable of coming up with a brilliant idea to improve your business, a brilliant idea that no one else has ever had before. Put up your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 4, 6. 6 hands. That's good. 6 out of 200. That's good because this is that's good because this is Australia and no one likes people who are up themselves, right? So, and I know you're thinking if I put my hand up, everyone at my table will think I'm a dickhead. I'm not going to. But let me tell you this. The other 194 of you are wrong. Inventors aren't more creative than us. Innovators don't have access to some special part of the brain that we don't have. Innovators aren't cleverer than us. Some of them are quite stupid. Really, we had this guy on the show and he invented something that was quite cool, right? But we were about to record the show and he said, I didn't realise he's from Adelaide, and no offence, but he said, I didn't realise the time difference between here and Adelaide was so great. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, in Adelaide the show's on at 8 o'clock. We're about to record the show at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, it's also on a Wednesday. This is a Monday. It's pre-recorded, right? The first thing, so inventors aren't smarter than the rest of us, but the first thing they do that is different from most people is that they think. They spend time every day thinking about how to solve problems and exploit opportunities. Now, I know what you're thinking. You think, what do you mean? I spend all day thinking. That's why I'm so bloody tired all the time. Well, do you though? Do you? How much of your day do you spend responding, reacting, coping with crises, answering your phone, replying to messages, answering your other phone, replying to going to meetings, answering emails? How many of you have days quite often when you get to the end of it and you think, I didn't have a moment to think today? Hands up. Yeah? How many of you, hands up, never have days like that? No one. Not one person. All right. That's good. I would suggest to you that if you don't spend a little bit of time every day thinking, getting out of the hurly-burly and thinking how to make your business better, you're over-prioritising today at the expense of tomorrow. What innovators do, they rope off a section of each day and they think about how to make things better. What do they think about? Where are the opportunities for innovation? Well, let me turn that round. Where aren't they? I'll tell you where they aren't. There's no opportunity for innovation at all where you know something is perfect, where you're utterly confident that it'll be done exactly the same way in 30 years' time. No opportunity for innovation there. Taste of Vegemite. I reckon it's bloody perfect. I had some this morning. I love it. I don't want them to change it. They can take innovation with that and put it in the cupboard. No opportunity. But maybe there are opportunities for innovation in how they manufacture Vegemite, how they transport it, how they package it, how they market it. Innovation is not just about your products and services that you supply. It's about every single aspect of your business and, quite frankly, your life. It's about how you deal with suppliers, how you deal with clients. It's about your processes. It's about your systems. It's about your marketing. It's about your internal management. It's even about how you talk to people at work. Every time you have an interaction with someone that doesn't go perfectly. If you talk to a customer, maybe they're a difficult customer or a difficult client, and you don't come away thinking that went perfectly. It's an opportunity to ask, could I have done that better? Next time, can I do that a little bit better? Is there some change I can make to improve things? I'll give you an example. I've been talking about my 10-year-old daughter a bit. We're having all these arguments at the moment. In fact, we're having one argument about different things. And it's all about the same thing. It's about how she doesn't want to really grow up and accept responsibility, and I do, because then I have to do less stuff for her. And I know I'm right? And I think she knows I'm right too. But we keep having the same argument. And it doesn't really matter that I'm right. What matters is that it's not working. And it's an opportunity for me to sit back and think, rather than just go, what's a better way of doing this? How I can get into this subject a little bit better. And that's being innovative, really. By the way, if you've got any ideas, I'll pay you for them. Thank you. American scientist Linus Pauling said, the best way to have a great idea is to have lots of ideas. And I'd like to add something onto that. The best way to have lots of ideas is to spend time trying to think of them. Let me give you one more from Harvard business professor Rosabeth Moss-Kanter. Habitual thinking is the enemy of innovation. Habitual thinking is the enemy of innovation. Now, we need habitual thinking, don't we? We need habits and systems and processes. Without them, there'd be chaos. But if we can't find ways of jolting ourselves out of habitual thinking, then we're not going to see the water we're wasting every time we turn on a hot tap. So how do you do that? One way is to question everything. Question everything. I'll give you an example. We had a guy on the New Inventors who invented a better wheelbarrow. Now, wheelbarrows have been around for 1,800 years, and he invented a better wheelbarrow. He was using a wheelbarrow, and he thought, this bit's all right, where you load it, and this bit's all right. But this bit, you know, where you empty it and it's heavy, that's bad. That's a bad bit. That hurts. That's like a bicep curl. And maybe you went to the gym yesterday and your biceps are ripped or something, you know. And that's the worst bit, right? So what he did is he thought, and most trays of wheelbarrows, right, they're bolted on at the front and bolted on at the back. And so you've got to tip them out. He put a hinge on the front and he put 2 removable clasps on the back, and he put a lever on the handle, and you walk along and you stop and you flick the lever and the clasps open, and because of the momentum, the tray flips forward and it empties itself. Isn't that cool? Do you love that? Now the thing about him, that idea didn't genius-like just pop into his head. All he realised was that he didn't think the wheelbarrow was perfect. He thought there was a design flaw. And he didn't know whether he'd be able to solve it or not. All he knew was that he'd seen a problem, and he asked the question, can I make that better? He had a crack. And how often at work do we go through something, some process or system or some dealing, some bit of paperwork or used to be paper computer work, and we know it's not perfect and we complain about it, but we don't have a crack at making it better. How often we do that? Another strategy I think that's a really effective one to help you jolt yourself out of habitual thinking and help you see things in a fresh way is to think like a customer or a client. Think like a customer or a client. That's easy to say, but how do you do it? I know a guy who owns a bookshop. Every Tuesday, he gets his staff to open it up for him. He comes in half an hour later as a customer, and he goes book shopping in his own shop. And he looks around and he wanders around. He told me that every single time, even though he's in the shop the rest of the week looking for ways to improve things, every time he does that, he sees something that he hadn't noticed before or comes up with some way to improve the layout of his shop. Every time he does that. I met a guy who runs supermarkets for one of the 2 large supermarket companies I was talking about before. Again, I won't mention their name, but there's only 2. He says he goes into customers' homes, looks in their cupboard, looks in their fridge to see how they, with their permission, obviously. He doesn't break in. Shush, quick, listen, look, what do I do? And then you know what he does? He goes shopping with them. Like the head of supermarkets pushes a trolley round with Mr. and Mrs. Ugboot from wherever, and he goes shopping with them. And he says it always allows him to get into his customer's head. Sometimes we need to reimagine our relationship with our customers. I'll give you a great example of this. Every year I host a competition called the Australian Clean Tech Competition. And what it's about is new innovations in clean technology. And they're wonderful things. Last year they had a fertiliser for plants that's made out of waste glass. God knows how they do it, but it works. They had a way of harvesting the heat that comes through windows, office windows, home windows, even car windows in summer, right? Lets all the light in, harvests the heat, converts it to energy, and uses it to power the air conditioner. Amazing. But what won last year was a lighting company who supply lights. Huh? How? Because about 5 years ago, they realised that their relationship with their customer was changing. 5 years ago, I'll say 10 years ago, what did customers want from a lighting company? This is not a hard question. Anyone? Lights, very good. You win a very small prize for that because it wasn't a hard question. Now what do they want? They want lights and something else. They want energy saving as well. They used to want lights, they used to give us stuff about that. Now they want energy saving for 2 reasons: to save money and to be seen to be going green. And so all these guys did was they realised that. They realised the relationship was changing. They developed a whole suite of new products, timers and sensors that they put in low population areas such as car parks, stairwells, bathrooms, corridors. There was one in the hotel corridor that I was in the other day. And so the lights only come on when there's a human there, or probably a very large, rat. They might set it off as well. And they save their clients tens of thousands of dollars each year. And there's an opportunity for us all there, isn't it, to try and imagine how our relationship with our clients or customers will be different in 5 years. What's changing? There's been so many changes recently. What's going to change over the next 5 years? And how can we put ourselves in a position so that we're there and ready to supply what they want? The last thing I'll say about thinking before I move on to the other 2 things they do better than us is this. It's hard. It's really hard. Because what you do is you write the word wheelbarrow at the top of a blank page and you stare at it. And it's not often these days in business we have to look at a blank page. Usually we know what the next thing to do is. Usually there's 100 next things to do, right? It's not often you have to actually look at a blank page, and it's really frustrating and you feel stupid and you don't think you're going to be able to do it. And that's the same for me, for you, that's even the same for Leonardo da Vinci. Everyone goes through that. But let me tell you something. Someone staring at a blank page feeling frustrated is where your favourite book came from. It's where your favourite song came from. It's where your favourite movie came from. And ultimately, it's where the idea for the organisation in which you work came from. someone staring at a blank page thinking, what do I do next? It's where innovative new thoughts come from. And it's not, if it was easy, then everyone would be doing it. But it's possible and available to all of us. So here's a method, sort of a little mini method. If you want to do this, just pick a day of the week, next Tuesday, go into work and question everything. Everything that you suspect might not be absolutely perfect, might be different in 30 years. Write it down. Just make a list of them. And then spend 10 minutes every day thinking about one of them. Don't inhibit yourself. Don't say it's no, and just write it all down. And what do you do next? I'll tell you that in a moment. The second thing that innovators do better than the rest of us is that they value their ideas. You know Lloyd Linston-Smith, the hot water guy? He told me when he was thinking of his, he was watching the cold water out of the hot tap run down the sink, and he's beginning to have this idea, and his wife said something to him. And you know what he said? He said, shush, as politely as he could. Because ideas don't come round very often, but his wife was there every day, right? They're still together, it's all right. We've got to be kind to ideas. How often have you had an idea and you thought, I'll write that down later, and you haven't? You know, John Stever, the guy who invented the wheelbarrow. How easy would it have been to him to think, how could I think of something to make this thing that's been around for 1800 years better? No one thinks that they're the person to have an innovation, to have an innovative idea. No one thinks that. Every great idea started off sounding like a stupid idea. Every great idea. So if I had $1 for everyone who'd come up to me over the last 10 years and said, you know that thing you had on the New Inventors? I had the idea for that like ages ago. And I say, good. What did you do? And they go, ah. Be kind to ideas. They're like balloons. Blow them up as big as you can before you judge them. We've got to judge them, but it's really easy to judge an unformed idea. That's not clever. You know, no one thinks you're good if you come along and pour a bucket of water over someone who's having a go. Blow it up as big as you can before you judge it. The third thing that innovators do better than the rest of us, I think this one's kind of obvious. They think, they value their ideas, and then they use them. They do the next thing. Now, it's kind of daunting to think, I'm going to, change our company by doing this. Just do the next thing and see where it takes you. Now, the next thing might be collaborating with someone else who maybe has some knowledge that you don't have about this particular area. It might be designing it a bit further. It might be trialling it. It might be it might be a number of things. But do the next thing. Work out what the next thing is and do it. Also, don't have overly high expectations. Like probably 1 out of 10 ideas, if you're lucky, will go all the way and make a sustainable change for the better in your business, which means 9 out of 10 won't. So accept that. And when you're sort of trialling one and it goes down the gurgler, think, beauty, that means I'm closer to the good one. I'm one step closer to the good one. Work out a way of trialling ideas that gets rid of the bad ones cheaply and quickly. Although you've got to be careful, there's a distinction to be made between a bad idea and a poor execution of a good idea. So, you know WD-40? You know why it's called that? You know, the spray-on thing? It's called that because they had 40 cracks at it. WD-13 wasn't very good. WD-22 was only a bit better. And you would think after WD-34, they would have been quite entitled to go, look, mate, you've had your fun, get back to bloody work. But they didn't, because they recognised that they had a great idea that they were executing imperfectly, and they continued on. They got to, which makes me wonder a little bit about the Boeing 747 and how many goes they had at that. Not to mention Mitre 10. Like, what was wrong with Mitre 6? It's just not working, mate. No one's coming. So they think, they value, and they use. Sometimes we need to innovate in our own lives, don't we? And let me briefly tell you about a time when going through that process of think, value, and use helped me make some fairly significant changes to my own life. I mentioned I went to a private school, then I went to university, and I was at university for 5 years, and I worked very hard in the second half of November of each one of those years. After 3 years, I graduated with a Bachelor of Economics. I think in that recession you were talking about, in the late 80s. And this is really a story about the value of tertiary education. I couldn't get a job, but with my Bachelor of Economics, I understood exactly why. In fact, Stephen, I could even graph it, which was excellent. I then went back to uni and finished law, and before I knew it, I was a corporate lawyer, and it was the worst thing for me. I hated it. I was totally in the wrong place for me. And, you know, the environment was so hard working. It was in a big tall building about 500 metres that way. You know, they thought the great thing about weekends was that you could wear jeans to work and get a park. You know, yay. I should say my boss was quite good. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. I had a boss who was, like, I remember we were working late one night and he was like, oh, look, we're nearly finished, you go home. I was like, no, it's fine. He said, no, look, we're nearly finished, you know, I'll finish it off. And I was like, yeah, look, Christmas has never really been a big deal in our family. So I'm sure the partners who work there, like, you know, people have photos of their kids on their desk. I'm sure at their bedside table at home, they had a little picture of their office and they go, oh. Back soon, darling. So anyway, I realised I was in exactly the wrong position. I'd had all these advantages in life, and I'd never made a choice in my life. So the first thing I did was I thought, what do I really want to do? And the answer that appeared was stand-up comedy. And then I thought, that's difficult, isn't it? But I valued that idea because I kept coming back to it. And I thought, right, I'll give it some value. It's important. I don't want to, you know, be old and think, what if? I'll give it some value. So I'll use that idea. What is the next thing? What's the next thing to do? And that seemed fairly obvious. I ran to the comedy store and said, you know, how do you get on? They said, oh, mate, you can come down tonight. And I went, oh, really? Isn't it like in 8 months or something? And the first gig I did this routine about a talking auto bank up at King's Cross, that if you tried to get money out after midnight, it'd go, are you sure you really want to do this? Why don't you go home and get a good night's sleep? It was gold back then, let me tell you, cutting edge. Second gig I did was at Rudy Hill RSL. And that was terrifying. As you drive out there, there's a sign that says, welcome to next turn off Rudy Hill RSL, the Vegas of the West. I just wondered, if you're driving to Las Vegas, there's a sign that says, welcome to Las Vegas, America's Rudy Hill. So if you want to go through this process, think, are there some areas of your business or your life that you think could benefit from a little bit less doing and a little bit more thinking? Don't feel guilty about it. It's really important. Value. Maybe you've had an idea already that you haven't been confident with, that you haven't done anything, you know, that you've scribbled on a bit of paper you haven't done. Share it with someone you trust. Get a second opinion. And use, if you've got an idea, just do the next thing. Don't overwhelm yourself with changing the world. Just do the next thing and give yourself a time limit and say to yourself, you know, if you don't do it by next Friday, you know, I'll hate myself and I'm a failure. So to give yourself a little bit of motivation. I also talk a lot about cultural things that organisations can do to build a culture of innovation where ideas are encouraged and shared and used. There's not time to do that today. I'll just end with this story. When I was a criminal lawyer, I had this... so I also, in that period of think, value, use, I also decided I wanted to become a criminal lawyer, and I did, and that was really interesting. But my first job I had was at a small firm, and I had a really tough boss, like really taciturn. And one day he came into my office and he dumped a big folder that had a transcript from a murder trial on my desk and said, read, right, because read it would have taken too long. And I read it all, and then I went into his office and I said, I read it all, I've just got a question. I asked him a question about it, and he said, I'm not going to answer that question. I said, oh, why not? He said, well, it's a stupid question. I said, well, why is it a stupid question? He said, I'm not going to answer that question. I said, why not? He said, you go away and think about it. And I went away and cried for a little while. And then I went back to my desk and I thought about it, and eventually I realised he was right, that it was a stupid question. And I understood why it was a stupid question. And I went back into his office and said, I've worked out why it was a stupid question. It's a stupid question because of this. And he went, which for him was like an affirming speech. But I learned two things from that. And the first one was that sometimes when we're working really, really hard, we're not actually thinking very hard at all. And the second thing is that when we do, take a moment, concentrate, and step back and think hard, think really hard, push through the frustration, then we can solve almost all our problems. Thank you very much.